All right. In our introductory session, we discussed the importance of knowing your costs in order to start thinking about your prices. So now we're going to consider some different approaches to pricing that you might want to consider for your own business. We're going to start with what is probably the most common pricing model, and it's called cost plus pricing. Now, in cost plus pricing, the model really it's all about ensuring that you can cover your costs and make a profit. And it's very easy to use because you simply calculate the total cost to produce your product, deliver your service. So that would include materials, time, people, overheads. And then you add your markup, that's to say the amount of profit that you need to make. And that's your price. So it's very simple to calculate. So for example, if you sell your time, then you can quote a job which might require, say, 4 hours. You simply take your hourly rate, multiply it by 4. If you're selling products, you might take a wholesale price, multiply it by a factor, gives you the selling price. So it's easy. And many people use this because it's so easy. But there's a risk. The first issue with this model is it doesn't take into account what other companies, other people in the market are doing. So you might find that you're much too expensive or much too cheap compared to your competitors. And this is actually quite a common situation. For example, I know a couple of people who set up their own garage. They focused on servicing cars very quickly, very low overheads, and they calculated a cost which turned out to be very much lower than their competitors, any garage in the area. Service was really excellent. They had more work they can cope with, and they ended up with a whole bunch of very disappointed customers, and they were exhausted. But conversely, I did a project for a very large corporation, many divisions, and they wanted help to sell and negotiate because they weren't winning any work. But in fact, their problem was that their cost plus calculation had calculated a price which was double that of their competitors. That's why they weren't winning any work. Second concern with this model is it doesn't take into account the real value that you're bringing the customer. And you might find that the customer is willing to pay you a lot more. So whilst the cost plus model ensures you're safe in knowing your costs are covered, you might be leaving money on the table. Or worse, you might be pricing yourself out of the market. So the key point I want to make is that your customers may well be prepared to pay more. So let's think about a real life example to see how this might work. And this example, it considers a bakery in Manchester in the UK. Now they'd always priced their cakes using a simple 50% markup on the ingredients and the labour cost. It cost them about £10 to make a cake, so they sold it for £15. Simple, right? When a new boutique bakery opened nearby, charging £22 for similar cakes, they assumed they'd have no impact. But in fact, their sales fell. And the owners were really puzzled because they thought their lower price would guarantee them their customers' business. But when they analysed the market, they discovered that the customers were associating the higher price with better quality. And they were willing to pay more for what they perceived to be artisan craftsmanship. So the original bakery then revised their pricing model. They increased the price to £20, so just under their competitors, invested a little bit more in packaging, presentation. Their sales went back up. Profit margin grew significantly. They effectively doubled their operating profit, £5 to £10. So the point I want to make here is that the cost plus model is a very good base, but I don't think it gives you the whole story. So I'll leave you now to think about cost plus pricing. And next time, we're going to consider a different pricing model, and that's called value-based pricing. I'll see you then.